Is cholesterol really the best way to predict heart disease, or have we been looking at the wrong number? Today,
Mhm.
we're exposing the real risk factor, coronary artery calcium score, and showing you how one person reversed arterial blockage from 50 to 30% in months. So,
Mm.
one of the most requested questions we get is what's up with cholesterol? And so here we go. This is Dr. V and me, Dr. V, the author of the
Oh.
Headache Advantage, by the way.
My ears today.
I take the time every week to get together and dissect all kinds of things that are being talked about in the world of health and help you determine whether or not this holds up in real life or if it's just something that was in one tiny little study, and whether or not we're seeing it actually unfold in the real world in our clinics so that you can know what the truth is just like us. Isn't that right, Dr. V?
Yeah, and I mean, from a business perspective, it's a great way to keep business, to generate business, to keep people alive, right?
Yeah, that's helpful.
That's what I teach for practice management when I'm in my seminars.
Hmm.
Keep them alive and make babies.
Yeah.
So
Speaking
I
of
guess.
next week, we actually have our first guest. It's going to be Dr. Virginia Irby from Sacramento. Well, actually, she's in the Folsom area of California. She wants to talk about thyroid and fertility. So we're going to have a great episode.
Oh, there we go. And you're going to try to keep that to a half an hour?
Yeah. We'll do what we can, who
Right.
knows? We'll see.
So coronary artery, huh? We want to keep people alive, keep those hearts pumping.
Yeah.
Cholesterol, we've talked a little bit about cholesterol and the misnomer that it really is. And that tide has been changing. You elaborated or elucidated a lot of that in our conversations before we started recording. That the lipoprotein A and B are
Oh, yeah.
better indicator, right?
Mhm.
So we're going to get into what causes calcium to deposit specifically in that coronary artery and why there specifically, right? And what can we
Right.
do? I mean, really, there's pretty simple things to do about it. I was going to share the screen. I pulled it up on Chat GPT. How do you reduce calcium out of the coronary artery?
Yeah.
It was pretty boring, blah blah blah, exercise, eat vegetables, eat good fat, all the stuff we're going to talk about. But it does talk about vitamin D, vitamin K, magnesium, and then certainly calcium. We need to talk about the different forms of calcium, and we'll tie parathyroid in there too, just as a overview of what we're going to be covering in the next few minutes, huh?
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about cholesterol, because that's what most people are concerned about. They're like, I'm told I got to take a statin. Half the women who were at the dinner or the brunch I was with yesterday were saying, I don't want to take a statin medication. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
it should have to.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to tell anybody what to do about that. But here's what I do want to share with
Mm-hmm.
people. I'm going to share a couple of things real quick about this study that I always mention recently. And it is, did I do the right one? Can you see this?
The Lancet. Oh.
Yeah, yeah. Right down here, this is a 35-year follow-up period in this study, and they were looking at total cholesterol in older populations. And it's shown that the high total cholesterol was associated with reaching age 100 years. I was like, okay, that starts a new conversation, doesn't it? Which makes us ask that what is important. And here's something I've been sharing with people for years because they ask about statins. There's this really great resource everyone should look at. It's called the NNT, which means the numbers needed to treat. And it's an international organization that gives you a red light, a green light, or a yellow light. And it says, look, statin drugs given for 5 years without known heart disease is a red light. This is what they're saying. This is the way I'm looking at this. I don't know if you've seen this, but none were helped, meaning zero lives saved if a statin. And if you go
And
to
that's
the
in a journal. That's in a medical journal, huh?
yeah, and then 1 in 50 are harmed, developing diabetes,
That
taking this.
sounds conservative.
Yeah, and 1 in 10 develop muscle damage. Right. This is something everybody should look at for themselves so that they can see
Wow.
what we're talking about. But
Yeah.
what we're saying is that, is that how do we help people with that conversation? But more importantly, like you said, how do we keep them alive? And they need to know about this coronary calcification stuff, right?
Yeah. So quick uh, tie a bow on the cholesterol story. Why is the body overproducing cholesterol, right? So cholesterol is the building blocks for hormones, right? So, we eat good fats, that becomes cholesterol, becomes acetyl-CoA, and then forms, progesterone, right?
Mm.
Cortisol, testosterone. So that's the building blocks for all these hormones. So one of the most common triggers I see is a deficiency of hormones. Think, menopause, right? For example, as hormones start slowing down. So if there's the body senses that there's the deficiency of these hormones, then the liver is going to kick out and overproduce the cholesterol to compensate for that. So just if cholesterol is a concern for you, look at getting hormones balanced, stabilized. Men have the building blocks to make testosterone, manage your cortisol, your stress, which we're going to talk about with coronary artery. Ladies, especially, menopause, perimenopausal years, consider things like wild yam to stabilize those hormones and therefore help balance the cholesterol that is not the devil that everybody's been told it is, but just to help people understand why the body's overproducing it. It's a sign of something. We're not treating labs, we're not treating numbers, we're treating people and what those numbers mean. So again, what does that mean? It means potentially inflammation somewhere, or especially hormone imbalance is the most common triggers I see.
Oh, and you're right on with that. And I think people forget that you need to have cholesterol to make your hormones. And
Right.
so we have a lot of people who are going out and trying to take exogenous hormones, get that T shot, get their, PRP and their testosterone replacement therapy, but they're on a cholesterol lowering medication, which means, of course, they're going to need help. They have to get it from an outside source because their body can't make it from them.
Speaking of, that brings up another good point, is that the most common medication is thyroid. Hypothyroid is another cause of low cholesterol. So if your thyroid numbers, if your TSH is not between 2 and 4, which really is only another marker, and TSH is not the be all for thyroid. There's a whole lot of other things there. That's going to be plenty of conversations we'll have, I'm sure. But again, it starts with putting people on Synthroid, thyroid medications, and then the cholesterol is not managed. So then they go on a statin. And it just always baffles me that the cholesterol or the thyroid medications are even more sell more than statins or cholesterol blocking medications.
Yeah.
It's quite, and then, I mean, just to throw it out there.
It was the number one sold medication in 2022, according to, I'm going to be doing a thyroid talk tonight because I was looking at thyroid medication, and statins are still being sold like crazy.
Yeah.
I remember listening to a podcast almost 5 years ago with a cardiologist who I thought was very progressive, because he was saying, if you've got high cholesterol but low vitamin D, he said, you're just deficient in sunlight, right? I was like, hey, right. I mean, you and I know
California.
Right. Yeah, there's a little more to it than that. But truly, I mean, that's one of the reasons your body is producing cholesterol, is trying to get it into the skin, get in contact with some UV radiation to make your vitamin D for you. Which is another hormone, technically, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And toxins play into that. I mean, that leads into what we're going to talk about, but cadmium and arsenic are a couple big triggers. Cadmium is the most common thing I see one of the very common things to block vitamin D production, blocks that P450 hydroxylation of activating vitamin D to a hormone, and then arsenic. So both of those are going to be in cigarettes. Whoa, you mean people shouldn't smoke? So arsenic's another, pretty common one that I've seen, as in the muscle testing and things to plug up that coronary artery.
Yeah.
So don't smoke. Wow.
Right.
Rocket science.
Well, and so to your point too earlier, I don't think people realize that stress increases your cholesterol because you're trying to have enough in your body to be able to have cortisol in case there's some danger happening.
Building blocks.
There was a really interesting study I was told about. I got to find it now, actually. Le Mans race car drivers, they were testing their cholesterol, and it would stay elevated for up to 30 days after the race because of stress. And the same thing would happen to students taking their MCATs, the general population around April 15th, right, for tax reasons. So you have to be aware that if you're in a state of stress, your body is like, okay, we need to be ready for whatever this danger is that's coming, and it will start produce cholesterol. So it's something your body's trying to do to keep you alive.
Right? It's an indicator. It's not a I don't know, what are we going to call it? It's not the death. It's not your death. It's
Right.
not going to kill you. It just
Right.
means that your body's under stress. And yeah, those are it's kind of like the weight thing, everybody says, lose weight and your knees will get better. Well, do the things to, make the proper dietary changes to lose weight and your knees are going to get better.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
it's not the weight, but,
But and then also, I mean, so why is cholesterol associated with heart attacks? Because it's found at the scene of the crime, right?
mm,
Where there's damage to the arteries. And but cholesterol is not the only thing that's there, right? If there's a hole in your artery,
mhm,
your body, if it doesn't have the vitamin C and all the factors it needs to heal that, it's got
mhm,
to figure out
mhm.
another way to plug the hole, right?
Right, right.
So that's why I've heard somebody say, and I think this is a nice way to put it, is they're blaming the firemen for the fire, right? The cholesterol
Ah,
there to be like, let's shore up this hole until you can heal what's going on here. And
right.
I think of calcification as another factor, same thing. It's like a backup mechanism. If you can't plug that hole with just cholesterol, calcification is going to come in there and help plug that hole too. So
Right.
it's strange that it is something dangerous, but at the same time, it's trying to take care of a short-term problem, and hopefully your body will get what it needs to reverse it at some point, right?
Right, right, right. So let's talk about how we do that, huh?
Yeah, well, let me show you one
Mm,
cool thing. I didn't show you the
mm.
results of this because
Oh yeah.
pretty darn excited about it.
You got a great case study.
Yeah. Well, this, first of all, this is the Widowmaker. If anybody wants to really know more about coronary calcium score, it's free on YouTube. It's an hour long and it's worth watching. And this is an angiography. So it's not a coronary artery calcium score. I thought that's what he told me it was. And then he sent me his results. And it was actually an angiography. But look at this up here. You see he's got 90% stenosis
See
here
if you can
and here.
click on it so it shows it's behind your other stuff there.
Oh, there we go. How about now? Can you see it?
Um,
You can't see that, huh?
there, yeah, I mean we can see it. Well, yeah, okay. RCA.
Boom. There. How about that?
Very nice.
Okay.
You're
So
dominating the screen.
we've got 90% stenosis here in the left main. LAD angiography shows 90% stenosis, but he highlights down here this 50% stenosis. And that's what I was excited about because he told me, he's like, yeah, I had 50% stenosis. But check this out. That was in April. He came to me in September. We started working on some nutrition. He went back in January, and I don't know if you can read this, 30% stenosis in just months. But check this out. He didn't even point out the fact that the 90% is totally gone. It just says patent. What does that mean? There's no problem there.
The world needs this information.
Right. So from 90% to patent, but he zeroed in on the 50 to 30. And I was like, oh, that's cool. But then we looked at this and said, wait a minute, how about 90% to patent?
There's something missing here.
Right. Which is so cool. So clearly there's something we can do.
Just refresh people's, what is RCA, LCA, all those stand for. People need to understand those are the arteries that feed the blood to the heart. So somebody that's new to this subject, RCA is not going to meet that. That's an old record company.
Right. But this guy was so excited. He's like, please share my results with people. Right.
That's awesome.
Like,
yeah.
So
thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Wow, huh? And so what was he on? What product was he on?
No. You got to wait till the end before I tell
you. Stay tuned.
What would you like to know? So it's the same thing that you and I have been talking about a lot. It's that balance between calcium and phosphorus that we really focused on. So that phosphate liquid that we have available to give people is like, what I love about it, it's not another pill, right? So people can get that in a liquid form. And so we were having him do, a pretty robust, I would say, amount of it, but, just a couple droppers full. So a couple times a day. And I was also giving him soybean lecithin.
Okay.
So soybean lecithin is a good natural source of not only the phosphorus, but also it helps to kind of emulsify and break up some of the cholesterol accumulation that's in there as well. So
awesome.
We're doing about 4 of those twice a day.
Okay.
Yeah.
Quick sidebar. I did, on your recommendation, use a couple of droppers of phosphate before a ride earlier in the week.
Okay.
It worked well. Felt good.
All right.
That ATP, adenosine triphosphate, to make the diphosphate to create energy and help me move my legs.
Yeah.
Thanks for that suggestion.
Nice.
Yeah. That was good.
So yeah, I mean the calcification. You and I have both seen some results come back from people doing that. And
Right.
we also wanted to find another way that we could kind of, get people moving in that direction or inspire them to think about it before they even get that done. And you discovered a muscle testing point that would be helpful.
Yeah, so there's an acupuncture point, CV9, right at the nail bed on the pinky finger. It is active on both sides. One is going to show, I believe the right side tends to be more nitric oxide, which is constriction of that vessel. Left side tends to be a little bit more calcium related. Um, but it's not 100%. So check them both and see what negates it. If you are a muscle tester, consider that against, calcium. The subclavius muscle and the collarbone is related to calcium metabolism. So that's going to get weak and affect your ability to raise the arm, especially past 90 degrees. The other key muscle that we're talking about here is the subscapularis muscle, which sub is the underneath. And then as my camera follows my hand, so it's the muscle underneath the shoulder blade that kind of holds the shoulder, that is one of the rotator cuff muscles. There's 4 rotator cuff muscles. It's the rotator cuff muscle that moves the arm up if you're trying to bat somebody behind you. So that muscle would get weak, and when that's weak, the shoulder kind of rolls forward. So that's that tension in the upper area, which brings up the other point. The other muscle that we really need to consider is a levator scap muscle, the muscle that attaches to all the cervical vertebra and then to the corner of the shoulder blade there. That muscle gets weak and tender when the parathyroid's not functioning. Parathyroid, right, is that gland that shunts calcium to the bones out of the tissue, out of the soft tissue and the blood, right? And so we want that calcium in the bones. We don't want it plugging up that the RCA, coronary arteries, and so on. Correct?
So amazing that you bring that up, because just yesterday, again, the whole group of, it was yogis, right? Or yoginis, is these ladies who yoga. And one of them pointed right here to her neck. She goes, I keep going to the chiropractor and I keep getting pain here, right? So that I keep saying that's the body trying to tell you something else is off. It's great that you're getting relief from the chiropractor, but let's find out what else your body's trying to tell you. And there, it sounds to me like we should be looking at maybe parathyroid, right? Support.
Right. And parathyroid's related to sulfation as well. Wally Schmidt, late great Dr. Wally Schmidt, first alluded to the fact that there's a close correlation, because sulfation is glucosamine sulfate, chondroitin sulfate, right? Regenerating tissue. And so the thyroid the sulfation pathway communicates with the parathyroid to regulate that rebuilding of tissue and so on. So if sulfation, that pathway that's garlic dependent, sulfur dependent, riboflavin dependent, zinc dependent, those are all things that are going to help that pathway. Magnesium dependent, those are all things that are going to help that pathway function. That's also going to de-stress the parathyroid, again, to keep the calcium in the bones and out of the arteries in the blood, where we don't necessarily want it.
Right. Yeah, no doubt. In fact, so the coronary artery calcium score, right? That's
exactly
what we want people to think about doing. And honestly, it's cheap, right? It's what, $50 to or $75 to $100 cash when people go get it done.
Wow.
Very quick and easy. And here, I'll show you really quickly what it gives you. I know you got some things to share too, so I'm going to finish up my shares.
You got good shares.
It's showing you like what you just said, whether there's calcium being laid down in these arteries, and there's something called an Agatston score, and high risk is over 300. And just to give you a point of reference, I've had in the last week somebody come in with over 2,000 in there. And of course, he never even thought to go get this score done. He's worried about cholesterol. He's worried about this. He's definitely worried about his heart. So now we know so much more about how to support this individual. And I've seen a lot of these scores come back pretty high. So if there's one thing that I want to encourage everybody to do, is just get this information about yourself, because it could be the biggest game changer in what's missing from your body. For sure.
Yeah, you just imagine to have a crystal ball of that for that guy's life, right? The crystal ball of if he did not recognize this, did not make some of these changes, versus now the trajectory of his life is been changed completely. On down to kids and grandkids, and who's he gonna know?
Right.
That's a massive game changer, right there.
Oof. Well, that's why they call it the widowmaker, right? It's this sudden cardiac death, and it it's just, it hasn't been getting better. with all the medications in the world, because that statin isn't doing anything for the calcification. And that's what we got to remind people. That's important to know. And I'm so geeked up and excited about the fact that we could see such a quick change in somebody.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
months.
Right.
Amazing.
Well, and that's why they call it the widowmaker, because oftentimes there really are very few symptoms. I mean, I talked about the shoulder rolling forward and getting attention like your yogita had.
Yeah.
You know, you know, most people are like, I need a chiropractor, I need a massage, you know, but you know, is that your coronary artery? Is that your heart struggling to tell you that? You know,
Right.
ankle swelling is, you know, means the heart's not firing properly, efficiently often, you know, or swelling around the ankles. Those are symptoms that, you know, but really what we're talking about is that chest tension. And usually when you feel that chest tension, you know, okay, is it anxiety? That's another liver problem as well. But realistically, people are missing it. You know, they just kind of ignore it, and then you know, till it's a fatal event.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that, you know, also on top of what you're saying, because again, I go back to this conversation with these yoginis because they're very aware of where they have limitations in their movements.
Sure. Okay.
And,
Yeah.
you know, the one lady who was kind of hosting it was talking about how relieving some stress here and the muscle was helping, you know, so much, because it wasn't just about stretching it or forcing it. It's really getting to the root of it. And that's where I think you really bring a lot of light to so many people, is understanding what is that associated with in the body, that specific spot. You know, I think if more people had that knowledge, it would change their lives in not just in that little bit of pain, but everything else that it needs for it. Right.
Yeah. Help us identify the triggers again.
Right.
My platform is pain is intended to elicit change, right?
Right.
That pain is the warning light on the dash. Hey, you know, check engine, or you're low on fuel. Tire pressure is low. You know, I mean, we'll go put air in our tires, but not listen to what the body's telling
Right.
so often, right?
Yeah. Right. So why is this happening, right? Why are people getting this calcification is the question I think that we should answer for everybody.
Yeah.
What's so common?
Great question. And so part of that, right, the correlation between cholesterol, you know, one of the reasons cholesterol goes up is not enough good fats, right?
Right.
So the body's trying to compensate for that. Good fats help keep the calcium in the bones, right? So oral pH, we talked about that last time with the kidney issues. Easy thing to do. You can do it at home. You can test your oral pH after every meal to see how it affected you, you know?
Yeah.
So, you know, if you eat a good fish meal, you know, oral pH is going to, you know, bump up a little closer to that 7.2 ideal range. You eat a birthday cake for dinner, you're going to be more acidic, you're going to leach B vitamins, and that pH is going to go down. So we want that pH in that 7.2 range, to keep the calcium in the bones. We talked about last week, keeping the calcium out of the kidneys and, you know, preventing kidney stones. I mean, that's easy measure.
Well, and okay, so the birthday cake, beyond that, right? Not to make everybody frightened of sugar, but you should be aware of sugar. Actually, it was Dr. Virginia Irby, who's our guest next week, who pointed this out to me. She said, "Look, Dustin, you remember like rock candy as a kid, right? It's like razor sharp." And she said, "You have glycogenated blood, right? When you have sugar stuck to the blood, it's like having those little razors on the side of those red blood cells, and that's going to cause damage to the artery. So if we're really going upstream, right, like what's causing the damage in the first place, too much sugar getting on the blood can actually literally poke holes in your vasculature, where that's why the blood has to come, or the cholesterol and the calcium has to come there to try to hold on to it."
I like that.
It's great, right?
It's a great analogy.
Yeah. And when you think about it, you know, that's 60% of that is just, they're wide enough just for red blood cells to go through single file. So if it's going through single file and it's got a little razor hanging off the top of it, of course, you're going to need a lot more whole food vitamin C and B3 and all the things that are needed to repair the veins. But if you don't have that, that's why your body's going to try to, you know, patch the hole with cholesterol and calcification.
Yeah. Do we know if there's any vascular benefit to berberine? I would think that, you know, if it's reducing A1C and helping, you know, stabilize that glycation, something like A1C could have, it certainly would be the upstream you know, solution there, and then mopping up the damage, doing, like you said, the vitamin C. We haven't mentioned, you know, well, Am I taking us down the next track? But forms of calcium, right? Do we need acidic forms of calcium? Or, we talked about this levator, like your Yogita. She would do well to consider a product like Calma Plus. The plus is the parathyroid tissue in there, because that levator scap muscle spazzes when the parathyroid's not functioning right. So the Calma, the parathyroid is in that calcium because it's calcium magnesium with the parathyroid to move that calcium into the bones instead of the soft tissue.
Right. So yeah, the biggest indication would be to use that is for calcium utilization. It's not just about getting the calcium in, it's about being able to use the calcium appropriately in your body.
So your heart can contract more efficiently, so
right.
muscles can contract,
yep.
so your arteries can be healthy.
God put a parathyroid in there. It's one of the reasons anyway.
Right,
so
right. Bones. Yeah. The clinic in Florida that does most of the nation's parathyroid removals, I've had several patients go there because by default I've ended up being kind of a Lyme clinic, okay. Anyway, by default. Anyway, one of my patients was there having her cancerous parathyroid removed. She said, what percentage of your patients are Lyme patients? And he said 100% of the people with the parathyroid tumor are positive Lyme.
Okay, so for those of you at home who have not heard of Lyme disease, it's a combination of pathogens, right? Bacteria and
parasite and virus.
Parasite and virus that create what they call Lyme. And so what he's saying is that if you want to keep your parathyroid, you should probably look into whether or not you have an infection from any of those, and then find ways through herbs and things that we do to get rid of those bugs. Right.
I repeat this often, but I mean, that is because it's my unique offering that there's very little in the literature about that. They're called stealth pathogens because they shut down the immune system's ability to identify them. And that shutting down is the inhibition of the sulfation pathway, which we talked about, then leads to parathyroid problems and, all this other tissue destruction problem, and opens the door for other pathogens, other bugs, parasites, viruses to flourish. So I hesitate to say, see if you have Lyme, because then they go on Dr. Google and it's like, I'm gonna die. There's hope. There's supplements. There's treatment solutions. So don't lose hope. Just look for the natural solutions.
Well, what's interesting for that is that we have a measles outbreak, and a lot of the ladies yesterday were concerned about this. And from a nutrition standpoint, I want to talk to them about calcium, right? Because it's so important to be able to protect us from a virus. But it's interesting how now we're understanding that if you don't have a parathyroid working, if you don't have the right form of calcium, you're not going to be able to fight off the virus. And so it is, like you said, very important to understand it's not just about taking calcium, it's about being able to utilize it and making sure that, you get a holistic approach to what's happening.
Right. And we both talked about somebody with the virus over the week when we met for lunch, right?
Yeah.
So what's the solution? Feed the hypothalamus. Hypothalamus needs calcium to regulate, that upregulation of metabolism when the body's fighting a virus. So the natural solution to break a fever is to feed the immune system the calcium it needs to break that virus, to then kill the virus instead of suppressing the immune system and increasing the morbidity that anti-inflammatory and Tylenol would do. That just weakens the immune system and it's going to keep a person sick longer in the big scheme of things. Whereas we can give them calcium and typically in an hour or less, or maybe two.
Calcium lactate, to be clear.
Calcium lactate,
right?
Yeah.
And this is where the lady next to me, when I said that, she goes, "I didn't know there were different kinds." And I'm like, yes, this is important, because calcium carbonate is what you find in almost all of over-the-counter stuff, because it's cheap and easy. It's limestone. It's really hard for your body to utilize it. And calcium lactate is a calcium salt that is 1,000 times more bioavailable than calcium carbonate. So if you're going to find a way to supplement calcium, I would definitely say calcium lactate would be my choice.
Right, especially for that, and again, so we need stomach acid to break that calcium down. So take Zypan, take something with hydrochloric acid in it to metabolize it. Then there's we have the acidic forms of calcium, right? Calsol, Calma, Calsol, and what's the other one? Calamo.
Yeah.
They're acidic forms of calcium. If they're, struggling acid wise, those have different functions. We use those for different purposes. That's another subject, I guess, but
Yeah. Well, all these things are easy at home that if you have any questions about, just put a comment below. We'll give you a little more detail about specific. These are products that Dr. Vrzal and I have been using for years to help
decades.
balance. Decades. Yeah. And they've worked. That's what's cool. They've worked.
Right.
And now
right.
we're trying to understand the why, right? We know that they
Mm-hmm.
work, but we're trying to help ourselves and other people understand why they're working.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The longer we do this, the more it all starts to make better sense, right?
Right. And so as you and I rant, I tend to go off on these tangents, but my goal with those is, as we bring up these subjects, we're trying to help people understand how their varied conditions, they may have, the ankle swelling, they may have the chest tension, they may have the shoulder tension. Then we're going to mention one of these supplements, like, help people solve their challenges, right? Because unfortunately, even a lot of doctors don't put all the physical aches and pains together with the lab tests and that sort of stuff. We're trying to empower you, the listener, to know what your body's really telling you.
And it does sound complicated, what we're talking about, for sure. I'm sure somebody might be going, you guys, they're all over the place. But our job and our goal is to make it distilled down to what's the most important thing out of all this, right? What's the next most important thing to do? And that's what we're here for, is to help you figure it out. So give us the questions, give us the hard cases. We'll try to pick it apart and figure out where the starting point would be for you.
Right. Good stuff.
All right. So what to put this all together in a neat little package, what are we saying? Learn more about whether or not cholesterol lowering is truly what you need.
Right.
I think it's worth, having conversations with your doctor about this. You're going to get different responses, but make sure that you arm yourself with some good knowledge about what's current when it comes to that.
Do your due diligence to figure it out. You have to be your own ambassador,
right?
And lobbyist to figure these things out. If your doctor doesn't have the answer, somebody will, or the research is out there.
There's a super healthy 70-year-old lady yesterday, 78. And she says, when I start walking my office, I see my doctor reach for the Advil because I'm going to give him a headache. And I'm like, good for you, right? Because she wants to ask the questions and she's an advocate for herself. And I wish I could give that to everybody, to have that same courage and strength to walk in and go, look, this is my body, my health, and you're going to answer my questions, or I'm going to find somewhere else to do that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. So physical aches and pains, just again to summarize the tension in the upper trap, especially on the left side. Left tends to be related more to the heart. And so if we're not metabolizing calcium and running the risk of calcifying that artery, there's going to be that kind of rolling forward of the shoulder, and leads to the tension in that left upper trap. And technically it's the levator scapular muscle back there. So if you have some of that, God forbid, if you have the chest tension, that's your liver struggling. That's, anxiety is one of the triggers that can lead to nitric oxide. That's, constriction of the artery. But we talked about the liver's relationship to laying down calcium in the tissue because of the parathyroid, laying down calcium in the arteries. So those are some of your early signs that hey, maybe you want to look at this, maybe get your coronary artery score figured out and get after it, in summary.
Yeah. And what do we keep in our medicine cabinet now? Again, it's phosphate, right? So clearly phosphate keeps coming up to the top of things that we should probably have in our at-home resources.
Calcium lactate for sure.
Calcium lactate for sure. Absolutely. Without a question.
Kids teething. If the kid's teething, you put them on calcium lactate to feed the body to get through that teething pain.
They're growing all kinds of bone.
Fever, right?
Yeah, they can't grow without calcium. Right. Calcium they can use, right?
Right.
And Calma Plus is one you mentioned. I don't know if that's something I would keep in the cabinet, but it would definitely be one I would talk to a functional healthcare practitioner who's aware of it and has had experience with it to determine whether or not that's something that you need.
Right.
Sidebar about that, just to testosterone production is heavily dependent on boron, and boron is sequestered in the parathyroid. So Calma Plus, it's my speculation, is a source of boron. And I have used it successfully with clients who are trying to increase their testosterone levels in the past. So think about that. That may be another little hidden nugget for the practitioners, that the Calma Plus may actually also help increase testosterone levels for those who are missing that piece. Right? An
That's
essential.
a nice pearl.
Yeah, thanks.
Right.
All right.
Awesome.
Well, if you think that this is helpful information, if you think this is information that's important for somebody that you love and care for to know, please share this video with them. Please leave a comment below. Please help us be able to reach the people who need to hear this information, because we really want to share this with those who are suffering and those who we don't want to go down a path that they don't know they're going down, and we want to keep them around and in our lives as long as possible. So we appreciate you watching very much, and
sharing.
a long list of feedback for topics. We've got the next 12 episodes planned out, so we got a lot to talk about. But we appreciate you being a part of this conversation as well. So thank you very much. And
Take
next
care.
week, we'll have a great new, our first guest. So look forward to that. Next week, we'll talk about thyroid and fertility. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week.